There are sort of like obscure anti-vax that have died during the pandemic. This Petey County Commissioner, I don't even remember what she was, in California, who went to an anti-vax rally and posted some anti-vax stuff on her Facebook. She now died of COVID. But folks are not known to us, and when they're known to us, they're often not known as anti-vax people. Incredible news story, which dozens of you sent me over the weekend, about a Washington State police officer who was sort of a celebrity anti-vaxxer. This was not an quit his job as a Washington State trooper because he didn't want to get vaccinated. During his sign-off, which we will look at, he told the Governor Jay Inslee to kiss his ass. Fox News being interviewed by Laura Ingraham as if he was some kind of hero quitting over the vaccine man. Dead of COVID. He's dead of COVID. He's dead of COVID. Governor to kiss my ass over vaccine mandate dies of COVID-19. This is from 2 days ago. Robert LeMay, 51, famously signed off in his squad car after 22 years of service in October, a few months ago. Casting Democratic Governor Jay Inslee had mandated state workers get vaccinated against COVID. LeMay died on Friday. This is his principled and defiant sign-off, where he also sends a shot across the bow at the Governor Jay Inslee.
Wish I could say more, but this is it. So, State 1034, this is the last time you'll hear me in a state patrol car. And Jay Inslee can kiss my ass.
A principled and defiant action that this guy took. Once again, he was also known to the Fox News community. Here he is being interviewed by Laura Ingraham and getting a hero's welcome. This was in October, right around the time that he did this stunt.
Well, last time I checked, they weren't really worried about the vaccination status at the border when we had, tens of thousands of people waved in one, a 2-week period. So they don't seem too concerned about that, Robert. What's next for you, other than being?
Other than catching COVID and dying. That the prayer did not save him from COVID, and that's did he not pray correctly? Did he not pray hard enough? Did he do other things wrong so that God did not answer his prayers? Because for all the prayer, he died of COVID. Laura Ingraham cuts him off. She's had enough of it. So what was next for Robert LeMay was catching COVID unvaccinated and dying. And before we can't say for sure about any individual he would have survived had he been vaccinated. You can't ever statistically, because the vaccines are so effective at preventing.
Having had issues with this in the family, reading up that these clots that were being found by morticians, by embalmers, that didn't have the same type of mineral content, namely what is usually present in a clot, like potassium, levels of magnesium, which would implicate it's not made up of blood in the same way that clots are. And a lot of people working in funeral homes have spoken off the record on this, but can you kind of educate everyone on this, since you are speaking on the record?
Okay, so I was first kind of drawn to there being an issue with circulatory system very early on in COVID, because we heard a couple of reports of clotting and stuff like that, and it quickly went away. But during the pandemic, when we were dying, clearly not from COVID, we were finding they were very difficult to embalm. We initially thought that our pump was playing up and it wasn't perhaps attaining the pressure that it should be, etc. And then I watched a video by a guy called Richard Hirschman, an Alabama-based trade embalmer, funeral director, trade embalmer. He goes from funeral home to funeral home and he's to embalm, and he does a great amount of embalm, probably a year, I think he said, and he has dozens and dozens of samples. A white growth that's grown inside people. Now, I watched that in disbelief. First of all, something was wrong. So, as a small funeral director, then I had to wait for the planets to align, if you like. It's not to do post-mortems on people. That's the job of the coroner here in the UK. But there are two different types of death. We have an expected death and an unexpected death. Now, with unexpected deaths, especially in young people who die suddenly, they're given what's called a post-mortem. Mm-hmm. This is done by the coroner. That coroner then releases the body to us, pending toxicology and histology and stuff like that, where they try and ascertain the cause of death. Now, when these people come to us, we are often asked to embalm them, especially in the case of this one young man who was 30. He passed away suddenly, no comorbidities, he wasn't an ounce of fat on. I mean, the guy was 30 years old, he's fit as a fiddle. He'd had a post-mortem and the family had asked us to embalm him. Now, you are cut inside a plastic bag that's then placed back in the cavity and the cavity's sewn up. So when the deceased come to us, clearly their circulatory system inside young people that have been vaccinated. The article I posted in the chat is supporting that. It was in the Epoch Times. It mentions Richard Hirschman. I'll give you his details.
Well, that man,
he would have been told to shut up unless it was his boss. He was the boss and it was his company, and that was a risk he was willing to take. And he probably reflected on it and thought, oh, perhaps I better not. Because they'll put pressure on you. They'll put pressure on you. Only one person, the guy who's done the most studies on this is Richard Hirschman. He's the only person that he found that had this inside them, that was unvaccinated, was a guy that had been involved in a serious automobile accident, and he'd had 3 surgeries, and he'd had blood donated from vaccine recipients.
and of course, the media has mislabeled you, so I want to give you a chance here. I know they're not true, but I want people to understand them from you. Where they said a notorious anti-vaxxer, that's how they labeled you, said it in the hospital with COVID.
Yeah, this is going to actually backfire on them. So happen. I, as a funeral director, to each other, because I've been very vocal and I've been very successful. I've had doctors, politicians, I've sat with It's above my pay grade. There's nothing I can do. I'm powerless to stop it. So that kind of gives you the guy from British intelligence, right? And now I take these things with a pinch of salt. Talking to me for around about 40 minutes, and he wasn't a double agent. He told me a couple of things. One of them I haven't spoken about, to me that I was a person of interest and I'd be targeted because I was upsetting people, obviously in control of certain decisions. So 3 weeks later, despite washing and dressing people maskless for 2 years that had been labelled with COVID, and they fell ill. An ambulance was called for me because I couldn't get my breath, and I was transferred to the local hospital. Now, the ambulance arrived. There were 3 members of staff who got out, 2 really big guys who were very nice, and I was quite a sadistic little paramedic woman who straight away started berating me. So she'd obviously looked at my vaccine status, knew who I was, and started berating me, telling me how selfish I was, and it's people like you keeping it alive. And this was in front of my wife and my child bed, So I kind of said, listen, I'm a funeral director. I know exactly who you're picking up. And she went, department, the only person there, despite the BBC telling everyone how overrun they are. I've spoken to nurses. Yeah, I've spoken to nurses. They argue about who's emptying the bins because they've got nothing to do. Because everyone's too frightened to go down there. In there, I had 3 lateral flow tests. All of them were negative. My wife had tests as well, from her sister assistant, and it's a negative COVID test. And the nurse said to me, "You don't have COVID." But they're placing the elderly on palliative care on the basis of lots and starving them to death.
Right.
Me from triage into a COVID ward. So I kind of said, well, why are you putting me in a COVID ward if I haven't got COVID? Oh, we want to be safe. Okay. He sat on the end of the bed. He said, I'm here to save your life from COVID. So, okay. I said, ask if you've looked at my notes. I said, because the reason I asked is I haven't actually got COVID. And I felt like I'd either been burnt or poisoned. It didn't. I'm an ex-smoker, so I've had chest infections. Feels like it didn't feel like that. It felt like I'd either been burnt or poisoned. Feeling it wasn't an illness. So he kind of said, "Oh, well, we want to be safe. We want to start you on a drug called remdesivir." So I said, "No." And I said, well, let's Google side effects of remdesivir. And thank God I took my tablet with me. And it's there on drugs.com. Shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, kidney function, liver function. I said, can you explain to me clinically how remdesivir will benefit me? Now, I know the history of remdesivir. I know what Fauci did to African babies. He went into Africa. He PCR tested healthy African babies, got a positive test for Ebola. They were asymptomatic. Does it sound familiar? Treated them with remdesivir, and there was a 53% mortality rate in those babies. Right. They died from kidney failure and liver failure. So I knew very well what would happen to me if I'd remmed in that. He didn't even want to engage with me. It gets better. So later in the day, I had a lady sit on the end of the bed, right? She was very skinny, around about 35, and she was very, very, very... So she introduced herself, but she was talking to me like, we're here to save your life from COVID. An exact same from a handbook. I had my notes and we went through the same thing. I said, look, I've had 3 tests. I haven't got COVID. Elderly on palliative care on the basis of, are you telling me the test was faulty? Well, I'm not medically trained. I'm just a representative from Oxford University. I want to offer you 2 drugs. One is called baricitinib called tocilizumab. One said, okay, explain. And she wanted me to sign a waiver to be given them as well. I had to sign a waiver to be given these life-saving medicines, you know. Okay, so I said, right, let's have a look then. Side effects of baricitinib: difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, tightness of chest, kidney function, liver function, blood pressure. Let's have a look at tocilizumab: difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, tightness of chest. These people are insane. It was the death of a prominent anti-vaxxer from COVID.
People that have died during the pandemic. What was next for Robert LeMay was catching COVID unvaccinated and dying. And
Without me, I said, well, I'll die then. Look at her face. She scuttled away. Well, I'm only doing what I'm told. I'll come back tomorrow. I said, don't bother. I said, because I'm never going to take it. And I watched the 2 guys opposite me that she coerced. Very, very, very wrong. And when we saw this in some of the Nazi camps historically, where these people may well have been dressed as nurses, they were still to advocate for them. And they went home and died. Trust me, it's happening. I'm getting people come in here. So as a funeral director, if I had 10 people come in that had lost someone in the hospital environment, 8 of them would be very happy about the care they received pre-COVID. None of them are now. They're all coming through the door frothing with rage and anger, and they're all being totally ignored.
Right.
Totally ignored.
Well, I hope I hope it's not putting the horse before the cart. There are very few people out there who say, you know what, we had
In my mind, if I go back into hospital, they'll kill me. I've got no doubt in my mind because they're under orders to do so. And I've got the evidence there. I can recount it. I've written to pals. They look me in the eye, I look them in the eye. And I know probably killed by mismanagement and remdesivir is my feeling, because they were considered heart attack victim. Every cancer patient throughout 2020 was relabeled as a COVID death. Every one of them. There were no increase in death rate in 2020. None at all. There was the moment they started putting the vaccine in on January the 6th, 2021. They were
we just saw it right at July 20.